You know that sound, right? That classic lub dub of a heartbeat? It's pretty much the soundtrack to our lives, a constant reminder of this amazing engine we all have running inside of us. But have you ever really stopped to wonder what that sound is?
Yeah, it's definitely not just some random noise. Think of it more like a code, a little two-part story your heart is telling you with every single beat. So let's dive in and actually decode what it's all about.
So the official term for these sounds, in physiology is heart tones. The first sound, that lub, that's called tone I. It happens right at the start of systole. That's just the fancy word for when the heart contracts. And the second sound, the dub, well, that's tone 2, and it marks the beginning of diastole, which is when the heart relaxes. So tone I and tone 2, those are our two main characters in this story.
Okay, so let's start with that first one, that deeper, longer lub. What in the world is making that noise? Turns out it's a bit more complex than you might think.
Believe it or not, that lub sound is actually a combination of 3 different things happening super fast. First, you've got valves closing. Second, the heart muscle itself tensing up. And third, your major arteries vibrating. But the real star of the show, the one making most of the noise, is that first one, the valves.
It all kicks off with pressure. As the ventricles, the powerful lower chambers of the heart, start to contract, the pressure inside them just skyrockets. It very quickly gets much, much higher than the pressure in the atria, the upper chambers that just sent them blood. And what happens when you've got really high pressure on one side of a door and low pressure on the other? Slam, right? That huge pressure difference forces the atrioventricular valves, the little doors between the atria and the ventricles, to snap shut. And that powerful slam is the main source of that deep lub sound.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. There's this secret ingredient, this critical phase that's absolutely essential for creating a strong, healthy lub sound. It's called the period of closed valves.
So for just a split second, the ventricle turns into a completely sealed-off chamber. The doors leading in are shut tight, but the doors leading out to the arteries, well, they haven't opened yet. Inside this little closed system, the pressure just builds and builds to an incredible level. This is what creates all the potential energy that, when it's finally released, gives us that big, resonant first heart sound. Without this phase, the lub would actually be pretty weak.
All right, so that's the lube. Now let's move on to the second part of our story, that sharper, higher-pitched dub, or tone 2.
The dub is a little bit simpler. It's made up of just 2 parts. Again, we have a main valvular sound from valves closing, and then a secondary vascular sound from the arteries vibrating a bit.
This sound is also all about a pressure difference, but this time everything's flipped. After the ventricles have pushed all that blood out, they start to relax, and the pressure inside them just plummets. So now the pressure in the major arteries, the aorta and the pulmonary artery, is way higher than it is back in the ventricles.
And while physics just takes over, the high-pressure blood in the arteries naturally tries to flow backward into the low-pressure ventricles. But the heart's got a backup plan, the semilunar valves. This little bit of backflow catches in the cusps of these valves and snaps them shut with a really crisp, clean sound. And that's your dub.
So now we know how they're made, but if you were actually listening with a stethoscope, how could you tell them apart? Don't worry, here's your field guide.
There are 5 key differences. First up, rhythm. The lub comes after a long pause, the dub after a short one. Then there's duration. Lub is just a longer sound. Pitch, lub is lower, dub is higher. Location is a big one for doctors. They hear the lub best at the heart's apex, the bottom tip, while the dub is loudest up at the base, near the top. And crucially, there's timing. The lub happens at the exact same time you can feel a pulse in your neck. The dub does not.
So the absolute easiest way to tell them apart just by listening is the pause. It's not lub dub, lub dub. It's more like lub dub, long pause, lub dub, long pause. The lub is always the sound that comes after that longer diastolic pause.
You can actually hear the difference in length, too. If we think of the lub sound as having a duration of, say, 100, then the dub is only about 60. It's a noticeably longer, more drawn-out sound compared to that short, sharp dub. Now, for most of us, the story pretty much ends with lub-dub. But sometimes, especially in young, really healthy hearts, there are other, fainter sounds you can pick up on, kind of like the ghost tones of the heartbeat.
These are called tones 3 and 4. Tone 3 can sometimes be heard right after the dub, and it's from the sound of blood rushing in and rapidly filling the ventricles. Tone 4 is even more rare, happening just before the lub, and it's caused by the atria giving one last little squeeze.
In kids and young adults, these faint sounds aren't a problem at all. They're actually a sign of a very healthy, very elastic heart muscle.
And as the source material puts it, these extra tones often point to really high elasticity and great tone in the heart muscle. It's exactly why they're most common in children, adolescents, and young people. It's the sound of a heart that's still super pliable and responsive.
So the next time you hear that familiar beat, maybe listen just a little closer, because now you know it's not just a simple lub dub. It's this whole complex story of pressure, power, and incredibly precise timing. It's literally the sound of life itself.